Hey everyone. So here we are, day 6 of my 30-day ideas challenge. So in my earlier trainings over the last few days, I explained what the ideas meant. It's an acronym for, ideas and information, downloads, epiphany, awarenesses, and stories that I wanted to share. So anyway, today I wanted to speak a little bit about power because it's one of those things, and hopefully you can see me okay. I'm just sitting in my bed. I was just doing some meditating and reflecting on things, and so I'm just sitting here in my sarong. It's actually quite hot here at the moment, but it is summer. It's midsummer after all. But anyway, so I wanted to talk a little bit about power because, as I said, a lot of us feel like our power's been taken away, especially lately with what's been happening. And I just want to remind you that you have a lot more power than what you think. And what I mean by this is, yes, I guess from a young age, we really are taught to sort of go outside of ourselves. So a lot of us have given our power away, and I gave that example yesterday as, when we have like a sore leg or something, we might straight away go and, oh, what does Dr. Google say? We go outside of ourselves, and there's a time and a place for everything. But the more that we can self-source and cultivate internal trust and, go inwards before we always go outwards, we'd get very different results. We'd feel a lot different. Now, when it comes to power, so where I'm going with this is no one is in control of our thoughts, our emotions, our feelings. I mean, people can trigger something in us, but, we're the ones that ultimately have the ability to, think about a situation a certain way, perceive a situation. So it really does, we have more power than what we think. And, it's the same with when we speak and, speaking things into existence. We have the power to be able to, I can see someone's just jumped on, say hey if you're there. We're just talking about power. I'm just saying that we have a lot more power than what we realize. So we're talking here about, our thoughts. No one has control over our thoughts. We can be thinking what we want, essentially. And yes, most of us are on autopilot, and yes, most of us are thinking the same thoughts that we had yesterday, and most of them are negative by nature. But we can, with awareness and consciousness and intention, change our thoughts over time. And it's the same with our words. We speak things into existence, as we know, but you also have power over your words. You have power over how you perceive a situation and how it affects you and how it triggers you and how you process it and move through it. And I want to give a few examples of this to really highlight what I mean. The first one is, and this is an example, and it was, I believe, and don't quote me the exact scenario and situation, but it was this lady, I think her name was Ellen Langer. So she was a psychologist, a Harvard psychologist, and she did this quite unorthodox experiment, and this was back in the late 70s. And what she did with some of her grad students is they did this experiment on these men. I think there was 8 of them, and they're all in their 70s. And they basically said to them, okay, so we're going to take you to this, converted monastery or whatever it was. And when you get there, when you get through the door, you're going to act and behave as if it's 1959. So it was like 20 years earlier. And so the men, when they passed this doorway, they, for the week, had to act and behave as if it was 1959. So all the cues there, like the radio and the magazines, all were 1959. There was no photos of the men. There was no mirrors. So there was nothing visibly to show their current age. Anyway, what interestingly happened over that week is because they were thinking and feeling and really acting younger, they tested all these biomarkers, so things like their, cognition and their taste and sense of smell and gait and posture, all these sort of other measures. And they all improved over the course of the week. And interestingly, I think on an intelligence test, it was something like 63% or something of them scored better on the intelligence tests. And also they got these independent people that weren't aware of what was going on to look at before and after photos. And majority of them, looked younger after that week. So what that also really highlights is, by thinking something and acting in a certain way, we can change our physiology. We can change our chemistry. That's pretty powerful. And we all know that. I mean, you have a thought, oh shit, is someone breaking in? And your whole body has a physiological response. That's just a thought. So we can, as we said, like start changing things in our body. And it's the same with, for instance, if you start feeling a sensation, oh, hang on, what is that? Is it a palpitation? Of course, go and get things checked out if it's persistent or it's alarming you. But you know what, even in your mind, you were like, oh, that's my body healing and regenerating. It's because we attach a negative or a story to it and we make it out to be something bad potentially. And then we look for all the signs and symptoms and everything that's out there on the World Wide Web and everywhere else to really kind of validate what our thought process is. So it's quite interesting. Another example, there's so many examples that you can go and look at. But this one was actually back in the 60s. And it was this guy who was what was his name? Clive Baxter or something like that. And it was, the mid 1960s. Anyway, he was in the CIA and he'd been in the war and stuff earlier. I think he was born in the 1920s. Anyway, he had worked with polygraph machines, the lie detectors. So he had this idea, you know what? There's this plant here, this common sort of house plant. I'm just going to, link it up to the, hook it up to the polygraph, the lie detector. Because with the lie detector, as we know, it will sense changes in the pulse and the respiration rate and things like that. Anyway, so he hooked up the plant and he had this idea, I might burn the plant. I might burn a leaf. Just having that thought, the machine went crazy. It was like the plant was registering that thought, that stress, that fear. And, it was interesting. So from then onwards, I guess that really, of course, highlights and shows that, our thoughts have power and other living beings, whether it's a plant, whether it's animals, whether it's humans, pick up on that. And it's the same with, the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So if you're consistently, watching some of these like movies that are blood and guts and violence and end of the world and all this sort of stuff. And of course, in the current pandemic, when there's a lot of fear and you're hearing case numbers and ICUs and deaths and things like that, if that's there all the time, you're in that energy and you're giving it thought and you're giving it energy, you're giving it momentum, you're giving it power. So, it's really interesting, as I said, when you think about all of this, you're like, well, yeah, we can start to take our power back in that we can decide where we're putting our energy and focus and attention. We can start to be more conscious and intentional with our thoughts and our actions and our words and our behaviors. So, you can really start changing your whole life trajectory when you start realizing that you do have so much power within. We need to be self-sourcing more and more. And it's interesting, this whole self-sourcing concept and term and, way of being and living, it's taking on new life for me. And what I'm finding is I'm getting more information about it daily. So I'm feeling a new program is coming and I'm thinking it will be around when this challenge finishes. So I'm thinking around my birthday, Valentine's Day. So I will just sort of keep giving it some more energy, some more thought, some more power, and we'll see what comes of it. But I really do believe that for so many of us, if we really started reclaiming our power and our truth, that we do have more power than what we realize, so much can shift for us. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to take the dogs for a walk and start making dinner because I think it's after 6 o'clock. Anyway, much love and I will see you tomorrow for day 6.